Just be away.
We also were expecting Kristen and Patty.
Yeah, we mentioned it. We'll be good. There's Jody for Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, I came down with COVID this week, so I'm being home working.
Good. It's going around again. Okay.
Not my ideal day.
I'm a little bit more enthused about being here, okay?
Did you just say we got arrested for meth? The executive director of St. Vincent? There's a, seriously, meth, distributing meth. I just saw the police report. No, you can't make this stuff up.
You can't make this stuff up. I would agree with that.
It's like,
Yeah, if it's really weird, it's usually real, or true.
You can't protect people from themselves.
Yikes.
no, I just read that and I'm like, oh my God.
Did you? There before the grace of God.
Yeah. No, I just came out of the behavioral thing.
Yeah, that came out.
Yeah. That was a perfect tie-in.
Perfect tie-in, I thought, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I go to St. Vincent's in Redmond.
Oh,
That's where I go.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Anyway.
Was it using or dealing?
Oh, no, he had buckets of meth.
Buckets.
Yeah.
Oh, this is the one that they busted over in Farmville?
No, he lives in Redmond.
Okay.
Yes. Anyway, that was the police report. Sorry, no.
Okay.
Just another exciting day here. Deschutes County.
Keep it from now.
Protect one's self, right? Is that what you said?
I think we've got everyone.
Okay, should we get started?
Yep.
Let's go. We're good. Okay, call the meeting to order. Start with the introductions, and why don't we start with the folks on Zoom first, so we don't get them.
Sure.
Jody and Joe.
Hi, Joe Healy, public member.
Jody Birch, public member.
And Whitney's also.
Oh, Whitney too, okay.
Hi, everyone. Whitney Hale, Deputy County Administrator.
I'm Nick Lee, County Administrator, Execution.
Lee Randall, Facilities Director, County Management Member.
Elizabeth Page, staff.
Daryl Parrish, public member.
Patty Adair, Deschutes County Commissioner, member.
Phil Anderson, public member.
Janet Kane, Controller of Finance.
Go back there.
Dave Doyle, County Attorney.
Pauline Ward, I'm a paralegal.
Bill Kinship, County Treasurer. Robert Tintel, Chief Financial Officer.
Okay, and then back in the back there.
Angie Powers, Administrative Assistant.
Great, okay, I think that's everyone. All right, let's move on to the minutes. Need a motion to approve the July 18th, 2024 meeting minutes. Or unless there's any questions, additions, or subtractions to those.
I'll move.
I'll second it. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Let's move on to internal audit reports. The first one is the county legal integrated audit.
So we're here to talk about the county legal audit. We have Dave Doyle, the county counsel, and Colleen Word here to answer any questions you all may have about audit. This was a cash handling audit, which is, or actually it wasn't, it was an integrated audit, which is what we sort of transitioned the cash handling audits from. So if you were here at the last meeting when we talked about the county clerk integrated audit, you'll see a lot of the same methods used here, and also some of the same language used in the findings, or find similar things. We just are trying to be efficient and report, not reinvent the wheel every time. But so the Deschutes County Legal Department provides legal services and provides advice to the Board of County Commissioners, the leadership, elected and appointment department heads, offices, other boards and commissions, and county employees. It's overseen by Dave Doyle, who's legal counsel. He's directly appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. Other staff within the department include 4 attorneys and 2 paralegals. Most of their expenses, the great majority of their expenses, are for personnel. It was slightly up over the past 5 years from 1.1 million to 1.6 million. This is a chart showing their revenue. They collect pretty small, as you can see, fees. Most of their fees are related to public records requests, so the time staff spend processing public records requests they charge to requesters, and that's what these fees are made up of, just based on the county council's discretion. They don't charge any public records requests to media outlets. The revenue is about doubled since 2019, but you can see that it's not necessarily very, that there's variation within their revenue.
I have a question that you used trended up slightly when it's 125,000 a year. It's $500,000 increase. I mean, do you call that slight?
Oh, for their,
You said have trended up slightly, and it's $500,000 in 4 years.
yeah, I mean, I think that's just the way that personnel costs have gone up with the county, so it's not other increases in spending. Our audit objectives were the sort of standard ones that we've used for the integrated audit. We looked at human resources, performance reporting, fiscal controls, procurement and vendor management, grants, information technology, safety and accessibility, and also followed up on previous audit findings. So our field work consisted of interviews and checklists with staff. We have checklists for both cash handling and information security. This is where we have just standard practices, best practices that staff kind of go through and check off whether or not they're doing those things. And then we also kind of review those as well. We also looked at some reporting out of their information systems, and also looked at their best practices in the legal field. These are our findings and recommendations. Our first finding has to do with performance measures. So county legal reports on 2 performance measures on the county's dashboard. We are looking at performance measures because we think they tell a story about how work in the county is performed. The county has adopted the Government Finance Officers Association budget standards to include performance measures in their budgeting, and so that's why we are including this as something that the county is promoting to do performance measures. Legal has 2 measures, but we thought that they weren't really quite performance measures, and that based on some benchmark counties, they could be improved. So the first one was to ensure quality services. It was actually to, the first measure was that they upgraded their case management system to allow for more real-time information sharing. We thought that this measure is probably trying to get at something related to productivity, and some of the better productivity measures we saw based on benchmarks were things like workload, projects per employee, different kinds of caseload per employee. And we saw that these kinds of measures were used by Clackamas and Marion counties. The second reported measure was to provide all departments with real-time legal counsel and support. We thought that this one might be related to customer service. And a better measure might be turnaround time for requests, which is reported by Clackamas, Jackson County, and Lane County, or also reporting the results of an internal customer satisfaction survey, which is done by both Jackson and Lane counties. We made recommendations to county legal to improve their performance reporting. County legal kind of agreed, but only partially, saying that they have workload metrics, and they shared some of those in their audit response, but didn't see the relevance of reporting performance measures for a legal department. The second finding was that some of the financial procedures didn't address some of the risks that we saw within the department. And this one is pretty similar to ones we've had in other cash handling audits and in the clerk's integrated audit. Some of the things that we saw that needed some improvement was segregation of duties in the way money, those fees for public records requests were coming into the department. The same person was issuing the fees and accepting payments. We also saw that there could be improvements in the accounting of fees. There was no accounting that would list all of the fees due, just the fees that came in. And then the final thing was that we thought there should be a reconciliation, which would show that the fees due were equal to the fees coming in. In order to address this, we recommended, like we've been doing for a lot of other groups we've been auditing, a fraud risk assessment, so that they could outline sort of their procedures, understand where the risks were within their cash collection, and then where they could apply stronger controls. They're a small department with a pretty low revenue collection, so it might be appropriate for them to accept a higher level of risk, or accept not have as strong of controls as someone like the finance department, which is collecting a lot more money.
Who would do the risk assessment? Who would do that? Would it be internally done, or would it be done by consultants, or?
It would be internally done. It would be done by their staff, and we've actually put some resources up on our website, internal website, to assist department heads with doing those assessments. We've gotten a little bit of pushback from, and not necessarily from Dave, but from other department heads about progress assessments, thinking that, well, this isn't required by county policy, so why should we be doing this? But county policy actually does make department heads responsible for their internal controls, and assessing risk is a really important part of internal control. And so that's why we feel pretty comfortable with making this recommendation that this is something that department heads should be doing. We've also heard from department heads, well, if you're making this finding in every department, isn't this really a county-wide issue and not an issue just for my department? The reason that those internal controls are the responsibility of department heads rather than finance is because each of them have very different ways of collecting cash and different project might be, some have a counter and a window, some get everything through the mail. And so it wouldn't really make sense. It really needs to be tailored to their business operations. So that's why we make those recommendations. I don't mean to imply that I got pushback from county legal because I did. They were wrong. And in fact, when we made the recommendation, they agreed and said that they would conduct a risk assessment and that they would update their procedures to reflect that risk assessment. And then finally, we have observations, and we use the term observation rather than finding when we don't have all of the elements of a finding. So all of the elements of a finding include having criteria, that's the rule that someone should be following, condition, criteria, condition, cause, and effect, and then a recommendation. In these cases, we found that county legal was doing things correctly. So there wasn't any cause, so there's no recommendation. So that's why we made these observations. But we looked at county legal's P card use. This is the purchasing card that they use for purchases like to buy office supplies or register for trainings, things that they need to do kind of quickly and small. And all of their P card transactions were appropriate. We looked at their use of their information system, which is called Bimonthly. They did very well, had good procedures related to their information system, different levels of users and access. Everyone's passwords were up to date, systems backed up, all of those things. But the one thing we did note was that they didn't have documented procedures related to things like assigning user roles, levels of access, things like that. So we didn't have a recommendation here because they really aren't using Bimonthly for any like external reporting. All of it's internal and kind of just within their own systems. So it's pretty low risk. But if they were to change how they used it and started to use it for more things like reporting or financial accounting for those fees that come in or for timekeeping, then they probably should develop some procedures around it, how to use it. And then I think this was the final area we looked at was safe space and accessibility. And commend them on their safety and accessibility program. Of all of the departments down in the downtown area, county legal had the best attendance at the safety committee meetings and also hadn't had any ADA complaints. And then actually I forgot to put up HR. We did look at HR. We didn't make any findings or do any field work in that area because they're a pretty small staff. And so the way that our benchmarking on that works, it doesn't really work when you have a very small staff. But they did have all of their employee reviews completed on time, which isn't the case for many departments. So they also deserve to be commended on. With that, I can take any questions, and Dave is also here for questions for him.
Any questions for legal staff? I do not.
Is there anything you wanted to share?
I would just thank Elizabeth and Aaron for putting eyes on our operations. It never hurts to have somebody give us some objective assessment of things, and we have implemented a number of the changes that they identified, including we did do a risk assessment internally. So thank you for that. I think our response, which is in your report, speaks for itself. And anything else to add? To try to answer any questions if you might have any.
Anyone on the Zoom call? Questions? Hearing none, that's it. That's, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple of follow-up items, three, looks like. First one is continuity of operations plans.
So we have 3 audits to follow up on, or to present on follow-ups today. The continuity of operations plan audit, the behavioral health practices improvement audit, and the facilities and property management cash handling audits. So on the continuity of operations audit, this one we put out, we were planning to report on this audit in April at the April meeting, but we ran out of time, and so it got delayed until now. But have noted that there might be some updates. There are some updates on the status since then. So I think rather than me going through the presentation of what was happening when we did the follow-up, I've asked Whitney to kind of give you all an update on where they are on the audit recommendations, and then we'll follow up again at the end of the year to include this audit with our global follow-up process. So we'll check in again and report at that point. Whitney, do you want to take over?
Sure. I'm happy to provide an update of the work that administration's been doing in partnership with the Sheriff's Office Emergency Services Unit as it relates to continuity planning. So since the follow-up report was issued, we've gone through a process to evaluate if the new COOP software system will meet the county's needs. And really technical expertise in this area rests with our emergency services team, and they've determined that they think that the county will be better served by using an in-house product rather than the software system that was being developed. So we're working closely with our IT team to develop a SharePoint-based tool that actually another county has had a lot of success with. We're partnering also with that other county to share information so we can hopefully leverage the work and advancements that they've made in this area. And we're hopeful that we'll have that internal tool completed by the end of this calendar year. We've done outreach with Nick's help and leadership to all departments and offices, really letting them know that we're going to renew our efforts with COOP planning and updating existing COOP plans and developing new ones where we need to. We've had all departments and offices identify their COOP planners. In some cases, those are new folks than the last time that we went through our COOP exercises. We've also asked them to identify backup planners, which they've done, so we have completion in that area. We've scheduled training for those COOP planners, and so we have training scheduled for September as a kickoff, and then we're engaging with the state to see if we can get some hands-on in-person training, someone from the state to come to the county and train all of our planners at once. If we're not able to make that happen, we'll probably have our group of planners go through some virtual training that FEMA offers, but we're working to sequence our training through the fall and into January. Our hope is that our training timeline and our software completion kind of hit a perfect T, and that in January we can begin to have departments begin to update and develop new COOP plans using that tool and having that framework in place. We're going to need to see kind of IT has a lot on their plate right now in the project space, as you've heard through other audits, but if that timeline lines up, then I think that's what we anticipate that we'll see coming into 2025. We're also working, one of the audit recommendations relating to continuity was that we develop a training program for all personnel. I've asked our communications team to work with emergency services on a video that will show at new employee orientation, and they've developed a script for that and are in process in shooting and editing that. So our goal is for that to also be complete by the end of this fiscal year, or excuse me, the end of this calendar year, and rolled out to all new employees as they enter the organization. We also have the ability to assign that, understanding that we may have missed some folks along the way who have onboarded prior to that video's release. So we'll likely be integrating that into our online learning portal and assigning it out for completion to staff once that's complete. And then I think we see also in the audit recommendations for continuity planning, a recommendation for regular exercising and tabletops. And that's obviously something that we're going to do as we get up and running and underway. So that's also something that once we get plan development and updates in hand, we'll be setting a regular training schedule together. Ashley over in Emergency Services and I are working on a 3 to 5 year plan with recurring tasks and training items. And so we sat down for a few hours this month and we'll continue to do that and then get department and office feedback on that training schedule. So that's the COOP update. This is one of the audit recommendations and topics that really spans the organization. So these can be a little bit time intensive in our ability to implement on the recommendations, but I think we're making good progress. I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
Any questions? I'm not really understanding that slide.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
So this slide is just showing the change in status from the initial audit report to the follow-up report. So it's giving you a sense of how many recommendations have been planned and how many are underway. Kind of see it doesn't necessarily relate to what Whitney's talking about because at the time of the audit, a lot of these things that she's talking about were still planned, and I think a lot of movement has happened in this area since April. So,
Whitney, I'm just curious, what county has something that we're thinking about utilizing?
Ashley has a contact, I believe, in Washington County, who's been very helpful in offering to sit down with our IT staff and has been utilizing this tool that's SharePoint based. So we're really grateful for that partnership.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to know who I had to be nice to.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of good work is being done on this front. No doubt.
one more thing to note is that Aaron, who worked on this audit, while he was doing it, he really sort of got very interested in this topic area and actually got certified in a certification in emergency operations. And so we've actually offered the administration and the COOP coordinators his services in helping them to implement this program as a non-audit service. And so as they move more into the implementation phase out of planning phase, we'll have probably him doing some non-audit work related to this topic. So we will make sure to maintain our independence through if we were to do a future audit, then I would probably do it and he wouldn't, and also make sure that management still retains the oversight and responsibility for implementation.
Anything else? Thank you, Whitney. Let's move on to the next one. Health services, behavioral practices improvement.
Behavioral health practices was also one that we saw a lot of movement on. The department made significant improvements in all 9 of the recommendations and are dedicating a lot of internal resources into implementing them. They've started improving onboarding, intern supervision, caseload distribution, and they've also expanded training for all of their staff. They have 3 work groups that are working on productivity measures, trying to determine a better strategy to measure and represent how their clinicians are doing work. And they're also working with a consultant to verify the accuracy of their workload data, optimize their client discharge and intake procedures. They set a timetable to implement these recommendations for next year. They hope to have all of them implemented at that time. And then the final one is a follow-up on our facilities and property cash handling audit. Let's see, there were, both made recommendations to both, the property department and lead heads of facilities department, so he's not allowed to, comment on this one. Recommended both of them to update their procedures to include more of their cash handling, activities. We also recommended to property management to update their fee schedule to include some of the fees that are related to foreclosures and the county's sale of foreclosures, so that they can better account for change in state law that is requiring the county to be more specific in how it accounts for the expenses related to foreclosures. The one that is still at plan and hasn't moved from plan was a recommendation to HR that was related to a conflict of interest issue that was identified at the start of the audit. At the start of audits, we always ask if there are any conflicts of interest, and our auditees were very forthcoming and said, "Oh yeah, we did have one, but we disclosed it." But they disclosed it in executive session, which does not conform with the way you're supposed to disclose conflicts of interest under state law. So we asked HR to update its policies related to disclosing conflicts of interest, and also to maybe create some standard forms that departments could use to have those disclosures in place. And they haven't been able to make any progress on that audit. I do think that's a pretty important one, though. We've had another issue with conflict of interest come up through our whistleblower hotline, so I'm looking forward to seeing them get something set there.
And then on that one, there's no anticipated date of completion. Just curious about that.
That was before we started asking for anticipated dates of completion, and we didn't get a response from HR when we,
You had another issue come up to the whistleblower regarding the facilities department?
regarding conflicts of interest generally countywide, but so since our recommendation is to HR, I think that would help. Departments can use some support in that area. Anything else there?
Okay. Anything on that? Okay, so we'll see on a later follow-up report. We'll see the resolution on that.
Yeah, and the global, yeah.
Okay, great. Correct. Okay, move on to the next one. Status report.
Thank you. To talk about our status report. So this is just showing where Aaron and I have been spending our time over the past year and 3 months. So we spent a little bit less time on audits this month. I think there was a lot of work getting ready for my annual performance review, and then also changing the committee schedule. So that might account for some of the difference there. Also, you can see that also shows up in extra time spent with the audit committee. The CPE time is higher than the 12-month average because we both attended the annual performance auditors conference. As far as the work that we've done, we completed within this 3-month period custom developed software audit, the clerk's office integrated audit, the legal integrated audit. We also completed the Fair and Expo Center RV park audit, but we issued that report last week, earlier this week. But we'll talk about that one at the next audit committee meeting. We have 2 audits that are really pretty close to wrapping up. One is on the health benefit trust. That's the fund, or just how, actually it's not health benefit trust, it should just say health benefits. We're looking at how the county HR administers the health benefit program. And then we're also looking at pre-construction services for the county courthouse expansion and renovation. So on both of those, we've had our end of field work meetings and closed those out, and we're now working on our reports. So hopefully we'll have those for you at the next audit committee meeting. And then we are just starting a translation and interpreter services audit, but really just doing background research at this stage. We haven't really kicked that off with the institution. So that's everything we have on our update.
Okay.
Questions on that?
Anybody have questions on that? It's pretty straightforward.
So what was happening on the hotline then?
Oh, I guess, yeah, the hotline is bigger too. We have 2 cases open with a hotline. Both of them are pretty close to wrapping up. The investigations have been completed and getting ready to put the reports together. So yeah, we had two tips come in on the hotline.
And very little non-audit work.
Can I just ask about the hotline work? Because this is still, I mean, I'm aware of the hotline. In my tenure, since we've been here, I don't think, in this position, I should say, I'm not sure if it's called hotline. But so as those reports are completed, are those confidential because they're personnel matters? Or are they reported to the audit committee in public session? Or I just don't know how that kind of plays out. Any information would be helpful. I just haven't thought through that.
Yeah, and so we haven't had a report yet. There's a substantiated finding of fraud, waste, or abuse. We'll report it to the audit committee and share it we are required to share it with the Board of County Commissioners. We have a manual that sort of outlines how we do that. If we don't substantiate a finding, then we don't necessarily report on it, and that's because we're not required to, and 2, maybe someone wouldn't want to know there was an allegation about them that wasn't substantiated, but all of our reports are public record too. So, and then when we would report annually on the activity of the hotline, and then would report that we had not substantiated tips come in.
And so the whistleblowers, I guess you call them, they're not promised any sort of anonymity on the website or anywhere.
They are. So the identity of the tipsters is confidential. Okay. They can submit complaints anonymously because we have a third party that takes the complaints. So some of them I wouldn't even know who made the tip. Yes, so the name of the person making the tip would not be included in the report.
Thank you. Thanks for that. CPE, what is that?
Continuing professional education.
Okay.
So I do that, true.
I just know what it was. So,
Like, are you really asking that? Or?
yeah, I don't know. One of those acronyms.
I know we only deal with.
I used to know, but I forgot.
We have CLEs, so I just.
I mean,
something like that.
There's like, that's what we deal with every day. When people speak in all those acronyms, it's so sad because what the public doesn't understand.
Yeah.
So thank you for asking that question.
That's a good point, and I try to avoid acronyms. I haven't cleaned up this template yet. So.
And ALGA is the American Legion of
Association of Local Government Auditors.
That was close. That was close.
It's a test. Okay. All right, we've got 2 special topics, bylaws, proposal. It's the first one.
Oh. Right. So one of the things we have been talking about is that as the committee matures, maybe it needs to have some bylaws around certain things. I pulled some sort of template bylaws that are applied to another county committee. So that's sort of where these came from. I noticed that there's actually a lot that would be in bylaws that you already have in your code. So those are things you can't change because the commissioners already tasked you with those things. But then there are things that maybe you would want to have bylaws around that you could change. So the way I put this together is anything that is not highlighted is something that you can't change, that only the commissioners can change. I guess you could ask the commissioners to change it if you wanted those things changed. And the highlighted areas are areas where you would have discretion how to build your bylaws and propose that. So the first area is just a mission statement. Other committees have mission statements. So I didn't know if you all were interested in developing a mission statement. It doesn't have to be today, but maybe just thinking about that. So something you might be interested in or not.
Good idea.
Okay. So the article, the purpose is outlined in county code as is the authority.
Sorry, the highlighted parts are things that we would be authorized to change.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the responsibilities are in code, but here are some of the things that you might want to have in the bylaws. So the code says that you'll meet when you deem necessary. So I don't know if you wanted more language around how frequently you met. This can also be restricting if you put your frequency into your bylaws, then you kind of have to meet at those times. So like that's there. The quorum is outlined in code, the minutes, how voting happens, the composition of the committee, the number of members, and who they represent. One thing we don't have real clarity on, is nominations for new committee members. A nominating subcommittee, yeah. So right now, the way it's done is that the county auditor kind of leads the process, puts together a recruitment with HR, gets HR's assistance in that, gets applications in, screens them, runs the interviews. It just struck me that now, especially that the committee is doing the auditor's performance review, that maybe the committee would want to take on more responsibility for that nomination process. And so I included this there.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of an open recruitment. I think that's, a good way to solicit candidates that are qualified. And I think the county should probably handle that rather than at least.
Well, I definitely think HR would still support in that.
That.
But just as far as, reviewing the applications and conducting the interviews and making the decision and the recommendation to the board. Because actually the bit that shouldn't be highlighted is recommendations to the board for approval and appointment. The board ultimately making the approval.
This may be too much detail, but it may be helpful to describe the current process so that is clear. For me, it was kind of a jump to the nominations, and I was thinking through how we get to the candidate pool. So it may be helpful. I don't know if at least to look at it prior to moving forward with bylaws, and then have the group decide what level of detail should be in the bylaws.
Mm-hmm. And the idea of bylaws is to, last as sort of a foundational document that would apply to multiple committees down the road. So, it's a lot of times for that reason, less detail is preferable, but.
Maybe including something like when there are vacancies, a nominating subcommittee will use an open recruitment process supported by human resources, something like that. That address your there?
Yeah, but again, to Phil's point, it may or may not be something that needs to be in the bylaws.
Or it could be, like, the committee may get involved in nominating applicants at its discretion or something like that, so that different committees may be more or less involved, or may form subcommittees, or maybe to leave it open for committees to decide on a case by case, committee by committee basis.
Okay, I mean, I was thinking that it'd be good to have kind of
Yeah.
some guidance on how this process
Yeah.
happens, because we wouldn't want to be accused of being unfair if it was different in this case or that
Yeah.
case.
So if like this language here, shall make nominations, the committee could still decide, okay, let's do open recruitment, and then the applications come to the committee and we sort of beat them down.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. And then we could defer to you for interviews or something, people who we nominate.
Yeah.
Something like that. We could sort of play with it as we saw fit.
Okay.
That isn't significantly different from what we do now, is it? Or what we've
Oh,
done
what
in the
Phil's
past?
saying is not significantly different than what we do now.
But is there a nomination that occurs now?
No, so what occurs now is I reach out to the board and see if they are aware of anyone they want to include, and then, or if they want to do an open recruitment, and then we do an open recruitment supported by HR. We get a first round of applications in, decide based on that if we want to proceed with interviews. We did an interview process that was me and Aaron, Patty, and Daryl. Interviewed all the candidates, and then kind of the interview committee decided to make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners.
Should you tell him all that?
I get grandfathered in, I didn't change it. I'm still good.
So are there like minimum qualifications for?
The minimum qualifications are, you have to be a registered voter in Deschutes County. I think that might be the only one.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, because we haven't had it before as I look across the room? I can imagine when we created this, department heads were department heads. We have elected department heads, and we have appointed department heads. And we have commissioners, we have a commissioner designated, but I look at our treasurer and we have a new scenario that wasn't initially envisioned when we probably created this. So if, for example, our treasurer wanted to serve on the audit committee, would he's not a department head, would it be a public member? Or should we rethink, I don't know, rethink our bylaws? So I wouldn't want to have a scenario in which we have one of our elected officials who's now not a department head not be eligible to serve.
We have one appointed department head and one elected department head are on.
And our current treasurer is not a department head.
Yes.
It previously was
Mhm.
when it was combined. So I was just curious.
Oh, like if Robert and
Well-
Bill wanted to be the representatives?
Robert's the appointed department head, and Bill is our elected treasurer.
Mhm.
So he doesn't serve in the capacity of the department. I'm just trying to think of, and I'm not suggesting that Bill wants to serve. It's just, it's a new scenario that we haven't had for 20 some odd years since we've been here. That we have this or a future treasurer who's not a department head wants to serve.
I think the treasurer could serve as the elected instead of as the department. That's how
Or as a
I-
public member, maybe. Either one.
No, staff is not allowed to serve as a public member.
I don't think, but you're not, anyway, okay, I don't need to go down the rabbit hole. I was just.
Yeah, the legal staff left, I guess we can ask them.
Yeah, I was just thinking about a new scenario that we haven't had before.
I guess, both Robert and Bill would be eligible to serve on the committee as it is now,
As a staff member.
as the staff, yeah.
If I were to get elected as treasurer or something, what I have to be on the committee because of a public.
I guess you and, Judge Fradley would have to decide.
This is one.
If you run against him, then you could just.
Yeah, it's,
Well, circling back to this language, I appreciate that it kind of gives a little layer of independence to you. Involved, at least be incrementally, at least less involved.
Okay.
So I think, I don't think I have a problem with that.
For the highlighted language, was this borrowed explicitly from other bylaws, or is it just a compilation of?
From other, there's some places where I made little changes.
I don't know that it should be a subcommittee necessarily.
Okay.
We're making a recommendation to the commissioners. I feel like that should maybe come from the whole committee. And if a committee wants to report a subcommittee, they always can.
Anything else on nominations? So attendance, I did just take this language from another set of bylaws, but I didn't know if you had thoughts on what kind of attendance you wanted to see from committee members. Wanted to include a section on attendance.
I think it's important to have some kind of regulation there. Somebody who never shows up, obviously you don't want to occupy a space.
That was my thinking. We had a lot of great applicants
Right,
last time,
yeah.
so if there are people who other responsibilities, then there are other people who would be interested in serving.
I mean, 3 is really pretty generous. 3 unexcused is pretty generous. That's almost
That's
a
half of the
year.
year. Well, look, so if they're every other month now.
Right.
Yeah, yes, it's 6 months now. It would have been, before it would have been 3/4 of a year, which is a lot of, it could be actually a year under the previous meeting schedule. If they miss 3, that's a long time.
Should we
But
reduce
6
that
months
to-
now, I
reduce it
think
to
2 might make more sense, but unexcused. I mean, people have things that come up, obviously.
And it's not like automatic removal. It's grounds for removal.
Well, yes, yeah, right. Yeah, I like 2, but that's just me.
And without prior notification to the chair, so it allows for a way to be excused.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
That may be something if these were adopted to clarify with all the members to make sure everything was clear, the responsibility to notify the chair.
That's a really good point.
Any thoughts about removal? This is not something we've had an issue with, so, but this was in the other set of rules I was taking a look at.
Legal. Did you say legal did review?
Legal has not reviewed the document. This was just the language I took from another county committee.
Well, one question I would have on that, what would be the process? Is it the commission, is it a vote? Is it the chairs? Sole discretion? That might be worth throwing in there.
Yeah,
And if
there should be
the
some due process.
question I might have is if the Board of Commissioners are the ones appointing the members, should the committee have the ability to remove someone who's appointed by the Board?
That's a great question.
Maybe make a recommendation that the board make.
Yeah, I would say make it a recommendation and the committee not have the ability to remove a member.
Yeah.
They could make a recommendation to the board.
Can I just suggest that we also have whatever the language is that maybe comes up to be subject to legal review?
Yeah.
This issue came up with a question about another appointed board commissioner to another county body, and David advised that there was an interest or a need, that it would actually required a public hearing before the board, and the bar was pretty high. That didn't ever happen, thank goodness, but I just make sure that the removal part, legal has eyes on.
Okay.
Well, next week,
This does say, that the member removed by not less than 2/3 of the total number of members. But we could make that, instead of remove the recommendation, say remove a member must be approved by not less than.
and then you may have already been thinking this, but I would suggest that if the committee chose to move forward with the bylaws, assuming you'd get a document number and it would go through legal before coming back to the committee for, adoption or.
And do we want to be deciding on bylaws that dictate that the board of commissioners can do something by majority vote? Or should we?
Yeah, I would just leave it, the recommendation to the board of county commissioners, and then they would do what they want to do, I guess.
Would the board also approve the bylaws?
The board will ultimately approve the bylaws and would approve.
I think that's good.
And how many do we have on the committee?
There are 9 people.
Okay, so 6 required to versus 5. It's one number. I was going to say I favor majority because I kind of agree with Daryl that, 3 meetings, that's a lot. So,
Just
yeah,
3 meetings.
the best interest of the committee are not served by something. This is that many meetings. And maybe a majority vote is more appropriate, but if it's 5 versus 6, it doesn't make too much difference.
Okay. Then I also included language on officers. We have a chairperson, but it's pretty informal. I always just say, hey, Daryl, are you willing to do it another year?
Yeah.
He says yes.
I said yes. I said, if anybody else is interested though, that wants to do it,
Yeah.
please speak now or step forward.
Right, so this is language, so this outlines just a chair and then also a vice chair, just to be there as a backup. Right now, when Daryl's not able to attend, we just say, who wants to lead the meeting at the beginning? So we'll make that process a little more formal.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
I think the vice chair makes sense.
Yeah, so too.
And then, so the duties are just the duties that are already, that Daryl already does, preparing the agenda with my assistants, conducting meetings, you can call special meetings, also subcommittees if he wants to be.
Was just a question on the officers. Should we select a particular meeting where the one-year term kind of ends and the committee discusses whether or not to, do appointments of vice chair?
The language here is that the
So 1 year
elections take
term.
place at the end of the calendar year, new term beginning prior to the first meeting in February.
Okay.
Going back to the duties, the vice chair, just assisting the chair and serving as the, leading the meetings, when the chair is absent.
So we don't need to do that until the end of this year if these are approved before then.
I think that'll be right.
Is vice chair a new
It's a new-
office?
We've never had one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we actually don't have
Makes
a,
sense.
we have a chair. I don't think even the chair is defined in the,
can I ask another question about the first duty of the chair?
Mhm.
I'm just curious, and this is probably a sensitive topic, but I'm just going to ask it. The chair shall prepare the agenda with the assistance of the internal auditor. When I was the community development director, the planning director, the code specifically states that the planning director sets the agenda, and then the commission, the planning commission could then change the agenda. But the reason, and this goes back decades, and it was because the board of commissioners hired the community development director and one of the community development director and the planning director to set the agenda. They didn't want to appoint, I don't mean it badly, but citizens that would then take the reins of the commission and it then went contrary to what the board's direction and plan. So I just wonder if, and I'm not suggesting this would ever happen, but I wonder if it should
But
be,
of course it could.
shall assist the internal auditor with the preparation of the agenda or something. Just, I'm trying to give the internal auditor who is appointed by the county administrator in coordination with the audit committee of the board more authority in setting the agenda. That's just a suggestion.
And that's in the code with respect to the
For
planning.
the planning commission, it's in code. I don't see anything in the code. It's interesting because for the planning commission, it is in the code that the planning director sets the agenda.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe that's the first step, just to make sure. it's something in the
It would
code.
also be very hard for a public member to really set the agenda, I mean, but on their own, they don't have access to the tools.
Who knows, you could get a
It'd be
rogue
impossible.
member and just
It just
comes up
doesn't
with some
work.
crazy self-serving.
Yeah.
agenda.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
I just remember having an experience where a planning commission wanted to, I think we're gonna tackle these issues. Well, that's not consistent with the work plan that the board of commissioners has
Right.
adopted for us to work on. And you can certainly raise these issues and you can change the items on the agenda. And again, not to suggest that would ever happen here, but it does empower the internal auditor. to set the agenda.
I mean, is that a function of the independence thing, or, I mean, it makes perfectly good sense to do that, but.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that it doesn't say. Yeah, it says the chair shall preside over meetings as well as provide input on topics for the agenda.
Okay,
So,
well,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great.
So, yeah, I would
That's okay.
agree with the auditor creating the agenda.
No issue here.
I think that might have been the other committee that I took the bylaws from. We could have that. Language where the chair prepared the agenda. So, good catch. Thinking about subcommittees, just that I was thinking that subcommittees could be pretty useful. Working, I thought nominating new members when there are vacancies, but maybe that's something the whole committee wants to work on as a group. But also, we formed a kind of impromptu subcommittee to do the auditor's annual performance review. And then I also thought participating in the selection of the contract external auditors might be something that only a subcommittee would, just maybe devote the resources of the subcommittee rather than the full committee to that. And then whatever other committees we might want to have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think with the change to the nomination part, I think it makes sense.
And so the subcommittee can, the committee can add non-committee members to the subcommittee. I guess that.
Yeah,
corrects
I mean,
what
that's,
you need.
that's the way this one reads.
And they would just, in what capacity would they be coming in?
We could
Member of
remove,
the
we could remove that as well. I think, maybe the group that I took this from, maybe, used subject area experts out in the community. So, if they wanted to tackle a specific topic that certain community members were involved in, maybe bring those members in. But, you're right, I'm not sure what that would look like, the audit committee.
Because you bring someone in without appointing them to a subcommittee, just bring them in.
Probably
in it like an advisory capacity.
So maybe, remove the language about community members.
I think so. I mean, it just seems like that's gonna, my gut feeling is that's gonna cause some sort of issues, people just coming in, sort of being de facto members of the committee.
Okay.
Potentially voting on something.
And there's an article on conflict of interest. Aaron and I just put that, that no committee member should be an employee of the Internal Audit Office or an immediate family member. We didn't want our family members to the committee, but I don't know if that makes sense to any of you, or if there's anything else you want to include about conflict of interest.
I think this is where legal review would be helpful too, because there may be some specific things in Oregon law that need to be
Yeah,
looked at.
well, I think in conflicts of interest, the definition is usually gonna have something a little bit broader than those two examples to include, financial interests or personal interests but this is obviously two specific situations, and there may be a conflict of interest that occurs outside of that.
It may be helpful to pull directly from the Oregon ethics statute and mirror that language or.
I mean, I think the ethics statute talks about disclosing conflicts of interest. It doesn't talk about about forbidding conflicts of interest. So, if you wanted to say, no one whose family member works for the county, say that, or no one whose family member is conducting business with the county. I think the difference between just disclosing a conflict of interest or actually allowing conflict of interest. Because I think the disclosures have to happen regardless.
Well, I would be in favor of adding something more generic on and tacking it on, something like, or have other business or personal relationships with the audit office that might reasonably affect their impartiality. Something like that.
Wonder what other agencies are doing, what their bylaws say, other agencies with internal audit departments. Check some, see if there's an example, someone else is doing some others.
It may also be, as I pointed out, in terms of just that particular part of conflict of interest could be under the membership as well, because it kind of relates to both areas. Who would qualify to be a member? And then the conflict of interest could be more generic.
Whatever you think, whatever you think makes sense.
And maybe we could talk more about disclosing it.
Yeah, I think this is more of a disclosure of generic conflict of interest language.
I honestly, I really appreciate the clarity that this provides. I like that it's in here, but I'm going to go back to the planning commission again, and there's one segment on the membership, and this is actually a code where it says the planning director may be an ex officio member of the planning commission. And when I was in that capacity over a decade ago, one of the planning commissioners said, "Oh gosh, it'd be great to have you up here with us." And another member and myself will say, "No, it wouldn't, because at the staff level, we're making recommendations to you. I can't make a recommendation and then turn around and make a decision on that."
You could, that might not be so good though.
So I like
But you
you shouldn't.
shouldn't.
Suggested.
So then this parliamentary authority, we're recommending Robert's Rules of Order. Is that something people think it's valuable to include, or is that too restricting, more informal?
I think that's- Thank you.
He's a very famous man.
Oh, Robert, yeah, Robert.
You may want to clarify and say. Between the two.
You'll have to give us your vote. Then, that the committee gets to adopt the bylaws and then deliver to the board of county commissioners for final approval, formal adoption.
Does anybody know the Robert's Rules of Order? I mean, very well. Like, I'm sure I've been in hundreds of meetings subject to Robert rules, but I don't know. Probably a real thick book.
It's not that thick of a
It's
book.
not.
It's like actually a pretty small book. I have one in my office at home.
Maybe you can.
Should I bring it? Do you want to borrow
It's
it?
a briefing one.
You can Google it.
Where can I Google it? Okay. Still, I'm sure he's still around.
YouTube video.
There you go.
I think I can, all the recommendations that you made, I can come back and maybe bring you another next time, document for your
Yeah,
approval.
first to look at it.
But,
Next meeting.
the one thing about with the mission statement, is that something you want to include in this?
Good question.
Yeah.
Is there language in the code that could easily be adopted as a mission statement, just so that they align closely?
County has a mission statement, right? I don't want to align with that.
And I have a couple general thoughts. One is, especially since we have two members that aren't here, and since we're meeting more often now, it may be helpful to let this kind of ruminate over a couple
Okay.
of meetings, since we currently don't have bylaws and it's not necessarily urgent
Okay.
to need to have or adopt something. And then also we could utilize the legal department's expertise as just kind of a courtesy review rather than prior to assigning the document number. And have them, they often do that for us on various either contracts or policies. And then they can kind of do that additional legal check to see if there's any potential consequences that we're not necessarily seeing.
Okay. So I could put it off until the December meeting. That's also the meeting where we have the presentation from Moss Adams on the fiscal year 24.
Well, I think what I was thinking is maybe just some progress. It could be part of the agenda item as a progress. So at the next meeting, if we have other members who are here who aren't here, maybe not to this length, but maybe just address some of the items that you update between now and then.
Okay.
And then December again, and then maybe we look at sometime in the new year.
Okay. I was just thinking if we wanted to vote for the chair, that would happen in December.
Yeah, well, I think
Yeah, that's.
Daryl would be more than happy just to step up informally in the way he has in the past.
No term limits.
Yeah, there you go. It could be.
I just think something as impactful as the bylaw is merits taking some time and giving all the members opportunities to kind of weigh in and think through the various iterations as they come to it.
Just going back to discussion about the mission. So there's responsibilities outlined in code, but not really mission. But rather, I guess this is the authority of things that you do, but not really building out why you do it or your values around it.
We could form a subcommittee to work on that.
Sometimes they like the mission statements, bylaws, the conversation does go on and on. You know, especially if you can't pull something specific from the code or something.
Is that something maybe we should just leave off and table for now?
If we come up with something great, we can always add it, but if we don't.
I think we have something we could ruminate on between now and February.
Are there any other comments from Jody or Joe?
No, I think it's a great idea. I like having a mission statement. So yeah, I'm all in favor of seeing a draft.
Yes, with the mission statement, I was also thinking down below when we talk about like removal potentially, you know, of a member, it referenced like, you know, could be removed for missing the consecutive meetings or violating the mission statement. So having that mission statement at the top, if we're referencing it as a basis for removal, would make sense.
Well, everyone maybe think about for next time things you might like to include in mission and values of the audit committee, and just think about why you're here and why you want to spend your time doing these things. Yeah.
Great discussion.
Robert.
I was just going to add ethics language that's a relative or a member of the household.
Okay.
So I know you're going to have legal review, but that just kind of adds on to the, you know, just the two examples, but it uses that phrase or household.
Next topic.
Yeah, let's move on. Government auditing standards, section 9. Yes, section 9.
So this is the final in a series of informational sessions that Aaron and I have been, and David actually started giving on our auditing standards to make you all more familiar with our auditing standards. Before I shared that, I actually wanted to share with you our website. And get to the government auditing standards from our website. So if you go to the section on performance, under standards, there's a link to the government auditing standards. And these are all the standards that we do have to follow. We've already done presentations on chapters 1, which is the, actually, I don't think we did one on chapter 1 because it just talks about the book. Chapter 2, which are general requirements. Chapter 3 on ethics, independence and professional judgment. Chapter 4 on competence in continuing education. Chapter 5 on quality control and peer review. We didn't cover chapter 6 and 7, which are on financial audits and attestation engagements, and those are things that are performed by CPAs. And our external auditors follow this chapter 6 standard for financial audits, but we get to ignore that because we're not even qualified to do those things. And then chapter 8 is the field work standards for performance audits. And then now I will talk to you about chapter 9, the reporting standards. Right. So chapter 9 is on how we are required to report on our audits. So an overview of what's included in chapter 9 talks about reporting compliance with standards, talks about the format of our reporting, how we need to present our reporting, the content of our reports, what we need to include, that we need to include responses from management, how we distribute our reports, what we do with confidential information, and then some requirements that we still need to pay attention to even after we report. So the first is just a compliance statement, and there's a statement in the standards that we need to copy into our audits every time we comply with standards. So this is the paragraph you'll find at the end of every one of our audits. It means that we comply with all of the standards that I just shared with you. And if we don't comply with those standards, we also have to report that we didn't comply with standards. So some reasons we might not comply with standards, if we have an independence issue that's related to some non-audit work that we did, but we still felt like we needed to conduct the audit and do the report, we might disclose that in a compliance statement. I can't really think of other reasons we wouldn't comply, but if there were one, we would tell you why. So it talks about the format for reporting. We need to create a report for every audit that we conduct. So there shouldn't ever be a time when we start an audit and decide, this is boring, I'm tired of this one's too hard, I'm just gonna pretend that it went away. Every audit that we start, we need to have some reporting for. The format is not required to be like a paper document. The standards allow us to use a format appropriate for the intended use. So if we wanted to just have a slideshow as our report, we could do that. The only stipulation on that is that it needs to be in a retrievable format. So if we decided to do a podcast audit report, we'd have to have the recording of that available for anyone to listen to in the future. We're required to clearly communicate our results, so we can't use confusing language to try to hide what we found. The purpose of the reports are to facilitate follow-up and corrective action. And then this sort of goes back to what I was discussing too on formatting, that reporting can include written reports, but also letters, briefings, and slides, and any other kinds of presentation materials. When thinking about content, it also tells us really specifically what we need to include in our reports. So our reports always need to include these things. We include our objective and scope. So at the beginning of the audit, we come up with an objective. We need to report on that objective all the way through. So we can't change our objective based on what we find. We have to report on what we started with. We can change it if there are good reasons to change it, but we have to document that we've made changes. We also need to include the scope, which just talks about the time period or the general topic area, so that it's really clear to what our findings apply, because our findings don't apply to anything. We can't just say Deschutes County did a terrible job. We have to say exactly what happened, exactly what area we looked at. We also have to include a description of the methods we used to carry out the audit. We include our findings, which are the answers to those objective questions. We also need to report on conclusions. And I wanted to take some time out to kind of highlight conclusions because I think reporting on conclusions is really difficult for auditors. And I think it's also difficult for management because it's one thing to just sort of report on your findings, which are just evidence. You're reporting like, we looked to see how many payments came in. 98% of the payments came in appropriately, but drawing that conclusion takes a jump in judgment, in professional judgment, and it takes kind of a risk, and there can be disagreements about what that conclusion looks like. And so I think that's something that I push myself and I push Karen to do, is to really make an evaluative statement about whatever we've been looking at, not to just say, this is what we found, but this is what we found and this is what it means. And so I think it's a little bit of a change in how audits have been written here in the past. And I think it's a change about how audits are generally are written. But I think that's because It's hard to do, and so it's rare, but not because it's not appropriate. Our standards actually tell us that we're supposed to draw conclusions. We also make recommendations for improvements. And then there are a few other things we're supposed to report on if we find them. So one is we find something wrong with the systems of internal control. We should report on those. If we find non-compliance with outside rules, we're supposed to report on those and actually report to whatever outside agencies we found those instances of non-compliance, make sure that they know. So if the county has it's using a grant and we find that it's in violation of its grant agreements, we are actually supposed to go to the funder and let them know those instances. And we're supposed to do that even if we are no longer working for the agency. So if we find something wrong and we get fired, we're still supposed to go and report to the outside agency that they're doing something wrong. And the last thing that we're supposed to include in our report is any instances of fraud that we come across. Another thing we always include in our report are the views of responsible officials. So we send to the people who we're making recommendations to. We solicit their responses to our findings, conclusions, recommendations, and ask them for their planned actions. And those views are an important part of our report. Our reports aren't complete unless they include those responses. If we don't receive responses, we are supposed to write a note just saying we gave them opportunity to respond and they didn't respond. Our code actually addresses this and says that we should receive responses from management within 2 weeks of sharing our reports with them. And then we're also supposed to explain any disagreements in the report. So if there's any disagreements that come in from the response, we're supposed to clarify those and comment on those. We're supposed to distribute it to those charged with governance, and we see that as the county commissioners, the audit committee, and management involved. But then we also, the Deschutes County Code also allows us to make our reports public and put them up on the website as well. If there's any confidential information that is really material important to the findings, we're supposed to disclose that it isn't included, and also report whether or not the omission of that information could conceal or distort results. We don't necessarily always need to. Sometimes we are using confidential information, but it's not necessarily, it wouldn't make sense to include it in the report. So right now I'm working on a health benefits audit. I am looking at some health information. It's protected by HIPAA, but there isn't any reason I would ever, put claims records into an audit report. So I can draw conclusions about that, and I don't have to disclose that I'm not including health information because it really isn't relevant to the findings of the report. So the financial auditors don't need to say, we actually saw bank account information when we're looking at payments. So we're looking at payroll, we saw employee bank account information, but we didn't include it in the report because that would be silly. You wouldn't.
So you have to disclose relevant information.
Yes. But in some cases, there are instances where we might issue 2 versions of a report. So we did this in the city of Portland because we had an IT report that included findings related to some information security controls that we were concerned that if, how the city was doing, how the city was securing its information, if that knowledge was out there, then bad actors could use that information to access the city's data. So we issued 2 versions of the report. a confidential version to management that included details and then kind of a higher level report to the public that just stated that we audited in this area without going into detail about what those activities actually look like. And so then even after reporting, so after we've got our reports up on the website, if we discover that we had insufficient evidence or that there was some conflict of interest or something that makes the report no longer reliable, we're still supposed to notify everyone about the change. We can take the report off of our website, but we need to leave a placeholder that says, we audited this, we had a report, but we had it taken off because we found that evidence, we found evidence afterwards that made the results not reliable. And that's chapter 9. Does anyone have questions about how we report?
This is just performance audits.
This is all audits.
All audits, okay.
So the first sections and
What says it on the head?
last section.
That's what I thought. Okay.
The first section and the last sections apply to all audits, but we only do audits. Next, update.
Administrative update.
Two, maybe three updates. The first, it's been wonderful to not talk about major staffing changes for a very long time. And now we have a couple. We have two. One is that our health services director in July notified us that she'll be retiring on June 2nd of 2025. So she provided a very long advance notice for us, which is very, very helpful. So we can plan for that being, of course, our largest department, most complex in many ways for a recruitment. We hope in early 2025, and then hopefully plan for some time for some overlap with Janice Garceau and for her retirement in early June. And then just a couple of days ago, we received, and that's her retirement that she notified us of. And then a couple of days ago, our human resources director, Kathleen Hinman, notified us that she has accepted a position as the human resources director, or same position. I think it's a director, manager position. But she's accepted the human resources director position with Bend Parks and Recreation District. And her last day will be Friday, September 13th. I know that their current human resources director's last day is I think a couple weeks after that. So they'll have a bit of overlap there, but not a significant amount. She said the message she shared with us, the decision was not made lightly, and I want to express my deep gratitude for the opportunity to have served in my role here over my tenure. I've had the privilege of working with an exceptional team and contributing to the county's growth and success. I remain deeply committed to Deschutes County, its mission, and the amazing employees who make a remarkable impact on our community day in and day out. And she made this for her time there, so a big loss for us there. We'll begin to think about what a transition looks like. She's committed to a smooth transition. Our deputy county administrators are both out late this week and early next week, although Whitney's with us here online now, but we'll begin to think about that here in short order, what that transition looks like. So certainly unfortunate that we have some departures coming, but that happens and we move forward as an organization. So those are two. The other big topic that has been in the news that you probably saw is that there has been a successful petition filed with Deschutes County with the adequate number of signatures to propose that the Board of Commissioners move from 3 commissioners to 5 commissioners. Our clerk, of course, and his team have evaluated the signatures and confirmed that, and now it's been a learning process to me to understand all the different pieces about that. So now the district attorney's office creates the ballot language, and then that will be formally submitted for the November 5th election. So that petition is on the ballot for November 5th.
If the DA's office comes up with the ballot.
I did, yes, I thought it was our county legal, I had mistakenly assumed it was our county legal department that did it, but county council, it's not, it's the district attorney's office that comes up with the official ballot language. And there's lots of questions we've had of, so what does that mean? Well, all it is if we go from 3 to 5, it doesn't mean that we go to districts, it doesn't mean anything else. It doesn't mean that we go to 3 full-time commissioners to 5 part-time commissioners until or unless it passes and the board would initiate any other sort of charter change or any other process would begin, no other changes would take place. And the way that we understand it, it will play out is so in November, on November 5th will be the vote. If it passes, then the May of 2026 election, there would be 2 seats of our current board that would be up, and then there would be the 2 new seats. And the 2 new seats would both be 2-year terms, and the 2 current seats on the regular cycle would be 4-year terms, so that we maintain a staggered terms among the commissioners. So just to share with you about that, if you have any other questions, of course, you'll have at least one more meeting prior to the election if you have any other questions about that. And then probably just the third item is, given our human resources director's forthcoming resignation, there may be questions about ongoing work products, et cetera. And one of the biggest ones that is really important is our wage and equity study. And we do not have any intention of delaying, pausing, slowing that down in any way, shape, or form. I share that with you because that was an audit recommendation, and it has very important impacts for the organization. So we're proceeding with that and happy to report on that at a later date. Happy to answer any of your questions.
It sounds like the departures are all for the right reasons, like people moving on and the careers are moving up, or those are the reasons you want people to leave, I think, rather than negative ones.
Kathy's been with us for a decade. It's been a great decade. She's excited about a new opportunity with Parks and Rec.
And there'll be some interaction, I'm sure. The 2 agencies have some interaction, I would imagine.
So yeah, one of the great things about human resources, of course, we're just across the one troop. One of the we interact all the time, just as we do across the hall with finance. So very, very important.
How long is the first lady who's retiring been with us?
I'm sorry.
The first lady, I forgot her name.
How long has she been with the county?
Yeah.
8 or 9 years, I believe, if I recall correctly. I didn't have that at my fingertips. She's been in her position since I think it was November of 2022 is when she was appointed. October or November. It was fall of 2022. About 18 months after I started in my position. Yeah. She had moved up in the organization. She had been behavioral health director in the organization prior to that, among other, maybe one of the positions, I don't recall before that. That was kind of before I was in my current position.
Okay. Anything else for Nick? Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you. I just got a text, somebody's watching. She started in 2015, so 9 years. As of this year, so that will be a decade.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay, input from committee on an upcoming internal control presentation. Jen?
Yes, so Elizabeth reached out to me a couple weeks ago and asked if I could present on internal controls. And I came back with that's a loaded request. And could I have this meeting and get more input from the audit committee on what they would like to learn about that we're doing here at the county? So I just pulled like a quick list of like what our external auditors look at every annual audit. These are all the areas they walk through all of our key controls for. So I could present on any of these topics, or if there's other topics y'all are interested
in areas of concern. I can kind of tell you what we're doing, what key controls we have in place to make sure.
Are there any topics that are broader or more involved or much broader than others among
So
this list?
all of these areas won't be that bad because we already have it documented. So I already know what key controls we have in these areas. Not to say we don't have them documented in other areas. These are just the ones the auditors look at every year and are like usually the high risk areas. I did add vendors and AP. It's kind of buried in purchasing, but I do think that's like a hot topic item. People like to know about vendors and what we're doing around those.
Yeah, I think our interest view where the most risk is kind of based on from the most to the least and based on priority on that.
Do you have a feeling, Jana, what would be the most risky or most interesting to the audit committee?
I think that one of the areas people are usually impressed with is our payroll controls. I think vendors and accounts payable is a high fraudulent area where there's a lot of attempts on us. And so what controls we put in place there to prevent fraudulent payments from going out. Payroll is our biggest expenditure for the county. So that's one of the, I always like to point that out to auditors. We spend a lot of money here. I think with all the federal grants, grant revenue is usually interesting.
So do you guys watch the match at all? Or do you leave that to the departments that are actually getting the grant?
Wait, so again?
The grants, you know, where they have like a 50% match or they have a 10% match that we have to put up. Do you guys look at that at all? Or does that just go through the department, let's say behavioral health? Do you depend on them to do it?
So I would say that because of the two audit recommendations in our external audit the last 2 years, we are looking at every single grant now.
Okay. I would hope so.
Yeah. It's a lot though.
Oh, I know, it's a
lot of
nightmare.
grants. We're a pretty small team, but we are looking at all the grants and the reports. There's many. We're not necessarily like health. They have a pretty robust fiscal team, so we're not looking at every single one of their grants. We're relying on their internal controls, and that's documented in their 3 sections. So I guess I should clarify, we're not looking at health. Like they have more resources for grants than we do on their team. But I'm very confident. I just answer questions when they aren't sure what to do. I don't know, Robert, what do you think? Are there any areas you think?
The other major area for us is Janice said, she's correct. Payroll, cash and investments, obviously that's always one. The other one is capital assets. That's, the biggest balance sheet item for the county is our capital assets. So auditors are always interested in it. So they're all great areas. That's why they're on the list, right? So that, maybe you want to start, if you want a series, you could start a period or every other period, or, 2, if there's some interrelated ones, we could group them, but maybe if you just want to pick 1 or 2 to start with, and then we could see how it goes and what the interest is like for the panel as far as the commissioning for continuing on.
Or if there's just something like, how do I know this is right? A question just like burning in your mind. You can also just ask me a question like that.
Yeah.
Give me a little heads up on it, and I can come with like how I know it's right. What internal controls we have in place that make me confident that that's not a risky area or as risky.
So I've asked Jana to present at our October meeting. Would it maybe make sense to do payroll and vendors and accounts payable at that meeting? Would that be too much for one meeting?
You said vendors, AP, and payroll?
Yeah.
How much time do I have?
It's only a 2-hour meeting.
And do those group together well in your mind? Those areas?
Vendors and AP do. Payroll's like a whole separate area.
We probably
Well,
need
maybe
to guys to do payroll at
payroll.
one time and vendors and AP combined at
Okay.
another meeting.
That makes more sense.
Yeah, it makes more sense.
And what about cash and investments and capital assets? Do those sort of go together? No, okay. Property taxes, assessment and collection, those, that'd be interesting.
That one, I would probably have to have Scott Langton come in on the assessment side, and then Judy Haas, our tax collector, would come in on the property tax side. I could read what they have documented with the auditors, but I'm not as heavily involved in. I'm a part of some of their controls on the collection side, but not the assessment.
Does
Yeah. But if y'all
purchasing,
are interested, I'm sure they would all just.
do purchasing and vendors accounts payable?
Those go together.
Go together. And
For sure to pay, yeah.
the charges could go together with, I don't know, that'd be a later meeting, I guess, but.
We kind of go through charges when we do our cash handling. audit,
Yeah.
so I don't know if we can do-
So how soon are the auditors gonna be here?
They come Labor Day week, for interim, and then they come, it's like 3 weeks of October is our audit.
Okay, October, so then we'll know December.
So then we should bring something forward the next meeting, just, I don't know,
Maybe purchasing and vendors and accounts payable. That makes sense.
those.
Yeah, the reason why I know Joe so well is because he actually found a huge purchasing scam at my husband's country club. Yes, he uncovered it. Thank you, Joe. Yeah, he's,
Sure, that was not fun, but I'm glad we caught it.
I know, I'm sure the club is too.
Janet, are you at the next meeting?
October 10th, I think it is, 10th? Is that?
I think it's 11.
Oh, that's
Friday,
11? Okay, the 11th. I don't know why I thought it was 10th.
I'm just gonna check the auditors. Yeah, that's right, for the auditors. Okay, so AP vendors and purchasing, and then the next one you'll want payroll.
Yeah.
Well, payroll's fun. There are lots of fun controls for that one. Okay. And then we can decide from there.
Yeah.
Interest, okay.
Janet?
Yeah.
Thank you, Janet. Yeah. Okay.
So, the last item on the agenda, committee information, is really just there, so there's a link, to the information. That just who all the members are, so it's an agenda item.
Do that. All right, I think that's it. Adjourned at 10 to 3, and then I guess Lee's gonna give a.
And then, for anyone who wants to stay, Lee is gonna give a presentation on the facilities department and the courthouse. And then he's also gonna do a tour for us of their facilities across the street.
And you want me to do this in the same meeting? That was currently-
Yeah.
Do you want me to stop recording 20 of them down?
Yeah.
Especially in today's world.
Yeah, we're gonna finish it.
I don't know.
But it actually looks like,
Right, I mean, there were a couple of.
Jody and Joe